Not for the case of a child who strikes out or kicks. That is not how the statute reads. That's not how the bill reads. It is not that case at all. This is for the case where the gentleman, or not the gentleman, this animal pulls a woman out of her car and knowingly beats the crap out of her and kills her. That's what this is what this bill's about.
Well, there you go. That's Representative Toni McCombie. She is, of course, from Savannah. She is talking about protecting DCFS workers from assaults, an important issue, which we'll get to soon. But we're going to start out, look, we're going to start out the show with guns. We're going to go right to back to DCFS and then abortion. So we're kind of covering the social issues, family issues. Then we get right into the economics. Then we get into the big stuff, progressive income tax, capital fund, a slew of taxes coming your way, and the budget. And legalizing weed, maybe we'll mention that. And of course, sports betting and casinos and the budget, as I said, the fiscal 2020 budget. So it's a hot show. There's a lot going on. We're taping this on May 24th, 6 days left, 6 big issues. It's Illinois Channel, it's public affairs. And so, you know, the big issue with guns is that, you know, everybody's got the right to possess guns. But if the fees get too excessive, and it becomes too burdensome to pay to get your FOID card, which most states don't even have, something like a firearms owner identification D card, you know, what's that right mean? You need to be able to get your card reasonably cheaply. You need to be able to comply if you're a law-abiding citizen. And, you know, it's gotten...
Well, Jeff, that's a question, isn't it? I mean, the point is they have the FOID card, which is a firearm owner identification card. Illinois, one of 4 states in the nation, I believe, to even require a FOID card. And we should mention that recently a court in Southern Illinois has said this is unconstitutional. And this has always been, as we have covered, gun owners' rights. And we did the March of the Gun Owners on the Capitol at the end of March. This has always been one of the most emotionally charged issues because a lot of people look at this as a classic example of the liberals from Chicago imposing their will and over-regulating the freedom that people have under the Second Amendment. And no matter when we cover this, we see it in the numbers. And by the way, let viewers say that, you know, as you watch our program, make sure you subscribe to the Illinois Channel on YouTube so you know when we post a new video, and also we want to hear your comments. But Jeff, let's listen. I had the opportunity earlier this week to do an interview with Todd Vandermeide, who is one of the lobbyists for the federal firearms licensees, formerly with the NRA. And we talked to him on the morning after the House Committee passed a bill, or the morning of, I should say, House Committee passed a bill that would add more regulations on gun owners on the FOID issue. Let's listen to what he had to say to us as he explained the bill.
And what else would so it puts a limitation, just to back up, on that transfer of guns, and what else would it do?
Well, it would also sit there and mandate that you have to submit fingerprints with every FOID application and every carry license. So now you're looking at jacking the FOID card up to about $200.
And the present fee is what?
It's $10 for 10 years right now. And now
from $10 to $200?
Well, they want to make it a 5-year card for $50. Times 2 to get to 10 years is $100. The state police can then back charge you for the fingerprint background check, which is about $30. And where we are, we see most fingerprint vendors for concealed carry charging between $65 and $75. So when you add it all together, for the same 10-year card right now that you pay $10 for, you're looking at about $200.
So on the other hand, there is a problem here that the state is trying to deal with, and that is we have a large number, I don't know whether it's 30,000, really, it sounds high to me, but a large number of people who no longer have FOID cards. They've been revoked, they're suspended, and so forth, and yet they're still, I guess, carrying them around. They still have the guns that they were permitted to get before. They should be, somehow, somebody should be taking those guns away. They're no longer entitled to bear arms, to possess guns. They may have domestic battery issues, marriage issues where they've certainly acted, if not violently, improperly, so that the gun may be dangerous for them to possess. They may have a mental health issue. So these folks, the state has basically said you can no longer own guns, and yet they have them.
Yeah, I
And
would
so
say they're not saying that you can't own guns, but this is a response by, in the wake of the shooting in Aurora, when we had several people killed at a place with a guy who, as it turns out, should not have had a gun. His FOID card was invalidated or had lapsed. But, the gun owners say this is a Second Amendment right. It's in the Constitution. It's an enumerated right. And to say we have to be paying these fees is unconstitutional. And that's, in fact, what a lower court ruled in Southern Illinois. That, as I understand, is going to be going to the Illinois Supreme Court. Because the gun owners tell me they look at this FOID card cost as nothing more than equivalent of a poll tax that some of the southern states used to do during Jim Crow to keep the blacks from voting. And this is nothing more than kind of a charade, the gun owners would say, to take away their right to own a gun. Illinois was the last state in the nation to pass concealed carry. They have very much of a history of being biased against gun owners, and they only did that after a federal judge ordered them to say you cannot refuse to have these individuals in Illinois be able to have a concealed carry because it's their First or Second Amendment right.
Well, it is a societal problem. I don't think you can say it's a complete charade, because you do have this issue with large numbers of people having guns. No longer are they entitled to have guns. You have that situation in Aurora. That person shouldn't have had a gun in his possession. And it's very costly. Whether it's the sheriff's office, whether it's somebody else, somebody is going to have to, in many cases, go out and find out what's happened with this gun. And if the gun has to go to a legal owner, has to go back to the state, something has to happen. That's very costly. Also, they're trying to plug a gap with having fingerprints, because that may be a more effective check on who.
Well, and they're required that, and that's part of the cost of this going up.
Right.
As Todd said, it's basically going up, as he said, from about $10 over a 10-year period to about approaching $200, not quite 200, but.
So we got to get out, but maybe an easier, better way to do it is maybe they can smooth that out. So instead of paying $200 at the beginning, if it is over 10 years, maybe they could make it $20 a year, which is a big boost, but a lot easier to handle than the $200.
We want people to be aware. Look, there's a whole lot of issues here, ladies and gentlemen. We're always it's not that we're packing the show or overpacking. We're trying to give you an idea of what's going on and not focus merely on the dollars and cents issues, the big budget issues.
All right.
But,
so let's go
there's
back.
some emotional issues, and the FOID is one. We'll be following that throughout the year. That's not going to end with the end of session because we got the Supreme Court case. But Jeff, you were saying let's go back to.
So back to Representative McCombie. He says that people saw in the clip, here's a representative who's trying to do, I think you'd say, God's work, because she's trying to protect DCFS workers who have been undergoing attacks. She's talking about, as she says, is not a person, but an animal who, violently attacked a DCFS worker.
Right. This was Pam Knight was a DCFS worker who, in 2018, went over to check on a 2-year-old, and the father, who wasn't supposed to be there, came up to the DCFS worker, Pam Knight, and as Representative McCombie said, pulled her out of the car and literally beat her to death.
And we have so we have heavy-duty sentences if that happens to a policeman, to a fireman. So she's trying to make that kind of assault on a DCFS worker analogous to assaulting a policeman, fireman. And it, as you know, Terry, passed overwhelmingly out of the House, and then it got bottled up in the Senate. Why?
Well, that's the question, and Representative McCombie says, look, isn't this a slam dunk? Why not extend to state workers the same protection so that if they are attacked, our court system can assign the same penalties that they would have if they attacked a policeman or a fireman. And as you say, it passed the House with no opposition, 112 to nothing. There was some not voting. But, you know, she had this press conference just the other day, and then following that, there was, at the time of her press conference, she couldn't even get the Senate to assign the bill that had passed the House to a committee. Following her press conference, it was assigned to a committee, and now it's scheduled for floor debate on May 31st, the very last day of session, when frankly, Jeff, it seems to me that's being buried, because we have a legislative logjam, as we started the show to say, with these major bills, and I would guess it's going to be somewhat unlikely, unless they can just do this on a voice vote, that bill will even get a hearing. And McCombie thinks it's for political opposition. And let me just, in conclusion, she would allege that this kind of points to the partisanship within the legislature, that they just don't want to give a Republican a legislative victory.
Right. So, you know, to close that out, folks, we got to get out. But look, we're balanced. We're not Republican. We're not Democrat. We are balanced here. Terry and I are. So, but we are saying maybe people want to, if you like what we're doing on the show, if you think this topic is interesting, share it with some of your friends and family, okay? Expand the audience, but also take an important issue and get involved. And maybe that's what it takes. Maybe some of the Democrats have to be reminded. Maybe if she's offered, she could change the sponsor to a Democrat instead of a Republican. The important thing is get it done. As we're going to get it done, because we got to go on to abortion. And Terry, what is happening on abortion?
Well, a number of things. As we tape this on the 24th, just earlier today, in Missouri, the Governor Parsons signed the Missouri bill that now basically outlaws abortion after 8 weeks. They don't even have an exception for rape or incest. You know, this is the same kind of bills that have been passed in Ohio and in Georgia in recent weeks. So-called heartbeat bill. Once there's a heartbeat of the fetus, they block abortion. Here in Illinois, we're expanding abortion to where we're going to do away with the limitations on partial birth. It means that we're going to be able to, in Illinois, if they pass the bills, they would be able to abort a baby up until the very moment of birth, and also do away with parental notification.
Right. As our regular viewers would know, last week we showed Cardinal Cupich talking about that, basically saying that they're stripping completely the rights of the unborn. They're removing parental notice. That law seems to be working well. When there's a need, when you have a sufficiently mature minor who is pregnant and is thinking of having an abortion, you don't have to, you can get a judicial bypass where the parents, for one reason or another, are not notified. But the norm under the current law is to notify the parents if you don't have the judicial bypass invoked. So they want to repeal that. They want to repeal the right of conscience. So somebody who's a healthcare worker and would find it against their conscience, unconscionable to be involved in abortion, may have to be. Important issues to be debated, and I guess after being bottled up, the Speaker has decided he's given the green light. That legislation is proceeding, or at least has the opportunity to proceed, within the next 6 calendar days that are left. So people should again be aware of this.
We'll be aware of that and other issues. There's a whole host of them, so let us move on.
A whole host of issues, yes,
because
let's move on.
This is why we say legislative logjam, ladies and gentlemen. This is what, as we said last week, it's one of the most consequential. I look at the list of things that they're trying to do, which is, you said, Jeff, just 6 days left. I don't know how they're going to get it all done. I mean, just to quickly run through, they got to pass the budget, the capital bill, the progressive income tax, abortion liberalization, Medicaid omnibus reform, sports betting and casino expansion, the FOID card, which we represent, and legalization of marijuana. So, and those are some of the major bills. So, speaking of the gambling, let's take a look at one of the issues here is sports betting that we're trying to bring to Illinois. It's part of the effort to raise more revenue. And we recently talked to the CEO of sports betting firm FanDuel, who was in the Capitol talking to lawmakers. He stopped and talked to us. Here's what he had to say on the issue.
New Jersey, which is the oldest market, and frankly, we think the best model. The revenue projections for our business have been 3 or 4 times what our original projections were, and just the consumer uptake's been incredible.
And so there we are. That was Matt King with FanDuel. And Jeff, I asked him, the governor projected about $200 million in additional revenues if they allow the sports betting online. And Mr. King said that according to what they did in other states, that $200 million is probably a fairly good ballpark figure to use.
Right, and the important thing is, as we tape this, there has been a major dispute between River Casinos. Neil Blum, who's extremely important in the casino issue, has been giving major contributions to a variety of legislators over the years, so he's a major force. As we see, sports betting is trying to come in. FanDuel is trying to come in. It was kind of a stalemate. Apparently, FanDuel, who has had an ad campaign, is now pulling that. They're backing off. Apparently, Pritzker has spoken to these folks and says, you got to work something out.
Well, we'll
so
see.
There's a good chance something will be worked out.
These things are so
That.
flexible that when it's hard sometimes to keep up because things literally can change by the hour. When we talked to Mr. King, he was saying that if they're given the green light to come to Illinois, and they've already done this in other states, and I asked him, how soon could you go? And he said, well, the real holdup is just working out the regulations from Illinois' side. They're pretty much ready to go. They don't have that much lead time. The lead time is if they get approval, working out the regulations. And, as you said, sometimes the other things that's going on behind the scene is this political tug of war. But the search for new dollars is going on because we're trying to have this capital bill that we'll get to. But I'm sorry, you were saying?
There was a lot of talk of a Chicago casino being a part of this package. I don't think that's going to happen very quick, but I don't know. If Madigan wants things to happen, 6 days can be an eternity. So anyway, that's sports betting, that's casinos, what we know at the moment. But the big issue, the biggest issue, which almost surely will be on the ballot in November of 2008 because it passed the Senate. Excuse me, what did I say? In 2020, almost surely will be the progressive income tax, right? Because it's passed the Senate. It's now passed out of the Revenue Committee in the House, and any day now it could be voted on, right? And if that happens, Pritzker will surely sign it since it's his baby.
Yeah, right. And one of the things here that, of course, the governor's trying to do, the progressive income tax, is get away from the state flat tax and move to a progressive tax like we have at the national level, where the more money you make, the higher your rate of taxation. Right now, everyone pays the same rate, although those who have a higher income still end up paying more because 5% of $1 million is more than 5% of 20,000. Let's listen. We spoke with Andrew Nelms of the Americans for Prosperity. He's the Illinois State Director, and here's what he told us on the progressive tax from his point of view.
There's nothing inherently regressive about a flat tax per se. The regressivity of our tax structure comes into play when we have the highest cell phone tax in the nation and the second highest property taxes in the nation and among the highest combined state and local sales taxes in the nation. In fact, Illinoisans work further into the year in order to earn enough money to pay all their federal, state, and local taxes than almost anyone else in the nation. But the few states that do have a later tax freedom day than us all have graduated income taxes.
Well, that will be the big issue in 2020 as we go to the 2020 election. It'll be on the ballot, but will it pass? Will it get the 60% on that issue? Will it get 50% of the people voting in the election? Could be very tough. Republicans will be arguing this is not just about taxing the wealthy, but this is going to spread to the middle class. It's going to chase people away. And when you even tax the wealthy, even if it is that, you're taxing entrepreneurs who bring jobs to the state, so you're pushing them out of Illinois.
What's your bet, Jeff?
This will be the
does the governor get the vote out of the legislature to put it on the ballot?
Oh, yes, for sure. As they say, it'll be on the ballot. That'll happen for sure. He may not get the tax rate bill that was going to set the rates. They may want to put that off till next year, but for sure he'll get that done. It'll be on the ballot. Big question is, will it pass?
And again, this morning, Mr. Nelms, who we just heard from, was testifying before a House committee. He said one of the problems he has with the governors setting these rates is that they're not indexed for inflation. So if that's the case, then over a number of years, you get increases in salaries and inflation, and then, all of a sudden people that where we once thought the 250,000 was really making huge money, you get people more and more, the middle class, moving into that. But the other thing, and one of the reasons they're trying to raise a number of these taxes is because they're also trying to do the first capital bill in 10 years. And we heard from one of those arguing for it, and I would say both sides of the aisle are arguing that we do need a capital bill. As we said last week, it's going to be $41.5 billion what they're going for, and that was a bit higher than some had, but we also talked about last week the great preponderance of the capital bill would go to transportation projects. Former Senator Kirk Dillard, who's now the chairman of the RTA board, Regional Transit Authority in the Chicagoland area, spoke recently to the City Club of Chicago in favor of passing the capital bill that he says is really necessary if we're going to keep Illinois moving forward.
Very importantly, 75% or more of the state's GDP is located in the RTA's region. That's an amazing statistic. We are, as Greg Hines writes from Cranes, somewhat two states. 75% of all of the state's GDP comes from the RTA region.
Well, Terry and viewers, it sounds nice to have an infrastructure bill that maybe takes care of roads and bridges and other structures that need fixing. The problem is it has to be paid for. Now, somebody could say, I guess there's a $10 billion match, and if that's right, and if it doesn't have to be repaid, which I'm not sure of, well, then the $42 billion bill that gives you that in structures only costs $32 billion. Only. Because you got $18 billion in bonds to pay back. You got $14 billion in state and local taxes, that are pay as you go. We're putting up on the graphic right now these taxes that number about 10. And gas tax will go up enormously, double. Vehicle registration fee, is a major thing. You total these up, we're talking over $2 billion. I mean, that's a lot of dough, and that may be over 7 years if it's pay as you go. That's not too clear. That's $14 billion if it's $2 billion in their pocketbook. So I don't know. That's going to be a heavy lift because, people facing possibly primary opposition in each party, are they going to want people, they're going to give their primary opponent to say, hey, this person voted for a major tax that's regressive and hits you in your pocketbook. So we'll see. That's a major hurdle. And also, I said $18 billion in bonds of paying back the principal, $14 billion pay as you go. What about the interest? I haven't heard people talk about all of that payback of the capital project.
Yeah, Jeff, as we taped this again this morning, we had another press conference at the Capitol by the Illinois Channel, covered that, and it's on our YouTube website, youtube.com/Illinois Channel TV. And this was a hearing by the craft beer makers, and they were saying, hey, you just raised a $15 an hour minimum wage on us. We're relatively small business people, and now as part of this capital bill, you want to be raising the beer tax from 23 cents and change a gallon to 27 cents. And they compare this to other states, Iowa, and, Wisconsin, and others, where the range of the beer tax there is like 6 cents or 12 cents, depending upon what state we're talking about. Illinois already twice the highest of the neighboring states. And some people are saying we have a war on business, $15 an hour minimum wage, increase in the corporate tax, increase in the income tax if they get this progressive bill. No relief, they say, for the property tax owners on business or homeowners. So, a lot of times these people are saying, okay, if we give you these taxes, we get a capital bill, the union guys get their jobs, we get maybe new highways and some, bridges that we want to have maintained as an infrastructure project, but people are still wondering, where is the relief? Where's the relief on these property taxes, among other things that are killing us? And that's what I'm hearing.
One way to say, yeah, where's the relief? Where are the reforms is the other thing. Look, as you point out, there are studies that show us to be the least fiscally solvent state in the country. $200 billion in unfunded pensions, paying that out over 30 or 40 years, you're looking at like $400 billion. The fastest growing job sector in Illinois is government in the last year. Illinois is 46th out of 50 states in private sector growth, 1% job growth. Most of the states are more than 2%. That's a big deal. So we need to have some reforms. And there are not any, I think, that are coming out of this legislature. Republicans need to be talking about that. If they're going to make an argument against, and again, we're not partisan, we like to see a discussion of issues, both sides. If you're going to make an argument against the progressive income tax, it has to be, one, the argument is made that the growth rate is lower, not higher in states that have a progressive income tax. And two, if you're talking about doing a capital fund with all these taxes, you better have some reforms, because that's how you start lowering costs and you make Illinois more competitive and you increase it.
The governor's trying to close a gap. As we talked, even if he gets the progressive income tax, it has to be passed by the voters and won't start producing more revenue if it's passed until, practically speaking, about 2021. So what do you do in the meantime? And Jeff, I know, let's take a look at some of the proposals of revenue on that budget.
Oh, right. So you're talking another $1 billion in basically new revenue there, tax on Medicaid providers. What does that do? Does that get passed on? Does that push people out of the business of providing stuff in Medicaid? A tax on sports gambling, okay, $200 million. That's not a great way to invite business to the state. They're hoping they get this big revenue from cannabis, which has some issues now, in terms of expungement and other things that law enforcement is pushing back. And that's a $39 billion budget that seems to be ready to go, but there's a fair amount of contingent revenue in that budget. We haven't had a balanced budget, truly balanced, in the last 20 years.
Well, one of the things, go ahead.
So that may happen. Look, Governor Pritzker is going to say, look, I got the progressive income tax. I got that on the ballot. He got his minimum wage. He got his budget done early, or it should be done well within the 6 days. The other stuff, I don't know. All right, Terry, we got to cut this short. We just want to remind, I would hope you liked the show. If you liked it, share it with your friends. Give us your comments. We want to be interactive. You can do that when you go to see us on YouTube. Come back next week and every week to watch. Well, next week is the key week, because that'll be the close of the legislative session.
And we'll do a review, certainly, of all once we know what's passed. And Jeff, thanks for joining us. Viewers, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.